happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
Got a lot of news, so we're going to talk fast.
Well, can I just say in general that we spent about 90,000 years leading this program with marriage news. We wondered whether we'd ever get past it. We're still fighting for marriage equality. But ENDA and religious exemptions and equality have taken over.
And this past week, civil rights leaders and law professors and members of the House of Representatives have told President Obama, don't weaken your executive order on LGBT rights. All federal contractors must be covered by it.
Including those religious organizations that we're giving federal funds to. That's another question. Particularly because our second headline is that religious affiliated institutions are stepping up their anti-gay discrimination.
And the U.S. Justice Department is stepping up its opposition to state bans on same-sex marriage in court. And it also issued a new guidance on reforming laws that now criminalize people with HIV.
A district court judge in Adams County, Colorado remains the most interesting state on marriage these days, C. Scott Crabtree struck down the state ban on same-sex marriage, but stayed his own ruling. But 3 clerks around the state are still issuing marriage licenses to gay couples.
The U.S. Supreme Court, Samuel Alito, no less, has denied standing to an anti-gay Pennsylvania clerk who wanted to appeal the striking down of the state ban on same-sex marriage.
We have friends everywhere, I guess. Including on Long Island, where a mayor is in trouble with his Republican Party for performing weddings for gay couples as part of his job.
An Ohio sheriff has stepped up his stings against gay men cruising in parks.
A new survey from the Centers for Disease Control says that less than 3% of Americans openly identify to the government as gay, lesbian, or bisexual. This is part of a health survey, which also shows that we smoke and drink more, but we're in better shape, too.
The Olympic champion swimmer Ian Thorpe has made it official.
And Laverne Cox is the first transgender actor to get an Emmy nomination. And there's a sideline to this story. We're going to tell you about an upcoming role of hers that hits close to home.
And Archie Andrews dies defending his gay friend.
Shocker.
Okay. So,
all right.
We start with all the news about the executive order that the president wants to issue on, that he said he's going to issue on federal contractors, which we've been pressing for a long time. And we can't get a straight answer out of them whether they will not expand the religious exemption that exists in all executive orders, human rights laws, and everything like that. So,
well, he announced weeks ago that he was going to finally issue this executive order we'd been asking for. He's been saying officially all along, I'm going to let the Congress pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. That'll make this executive order unnecessary, but that's going down, we hope. So the issue has turned to the executive order, but there's been no word on the text of it.
But we're not letting the grass grow under our feet. 50 law professors urged Obama not to expand the religious exemption on the order. 34 House Democrats urged him not to do that. And there are no out gays among these House Democrats who are urging him on that.
Well, we asked about that because 34 Democrats wrote him a letter saying no religious exemption in this executive order, because the idea is that you don't want people who are being hired by the federal government to perform functions and being given public money to do so, to be allowed to discriminate.
Yes.
They're not allowed to discriminate on the basis of race or sex or national origin, so why should they be allowed to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity?
Right.
So why didn't the LGBT members of Congress, LGB, there's no openly transgender member of Congress, sign on to this letter? And the answer is that they are supposedly negotiating with the White House on crafting a watered-down religious exemption that will be acceptable. Now, that sounds a little dicey, but the fact is that in writing, for instance, same-sex marriage equality laws in states around the country, we have been happy to include a statement that simply states that churches, for instance, are not required to perform same-sex marriages.
And there's something about religious organizations being allowed to hire from their group to some extent
in
as
ministerial
well. Yes.
functions, not the janitor,
right,
not the nurse in the hospital, but right, in religiously affiliated jobs. So perhaps what they're trying to put together is a so-called religious exemption in the contractors' executive order that would reiterate this.
If that would give them some cover, okay. But the simplest thing to do, folks, is just do the same exemption that's in all other human rights laws. And it is good to see that groups like the NAACP and the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, who are the ones who put together ENDA,
right,
are for this. Now, I guess we should talk about what's going on with ENDA. By the way, also one former Congresswoman, Kathy Dahl-Kemper, took her name off the letter calling for a religious exemption. She said it was an error in judgment. She has an out gay son named Nathan. Maybe he spoke to her.
Well, and she says she was sort of seduced into this because this letter to the president asking for a religious exemption came from a guy named Michael Ware, who used to work in the White House running the faith-based organizations project in the White House. Ever since Bush put that in place, it's just been a disaster. The idea that faith-based organizations would have an office in the White House and be solicited for federal contracts, but given all these exemptions is horrendous.
And the New York Times did a strong editorial on this. Now, the White House continues to support ENDA. So far, the way it is, the press secretary, this guy Ernest, that is his name, he said, "We're aware advocates have changed their position. We haven't changed ours."
Well, that's because they haven't had time to think about it
the
yet.
National Gay and Lesbian Task Force has urged the president to veto the bill if it passes in its present form.
Yes.
And we are worried at this point that if Republicans get smart, knowing that there's going to be a gay rights bill someday, that they pass this one with a broad religious exemption.
And then we really will be in a pickle because we will want the president to veto it, and that feels impossible. On the other hand, it felt impossible to gin up any opposition to ENDA.
And the White House is not ruling out a religious exemption in the executive order. Nancy Pelosi, who's the House Minority Leader, says ENDA in its current form is better than nothing, but has a secret plan.
Yeah, a secret plan to fix it. But how is she going to get the House to vote for an ENDA, even attached to a big appropriations bill, with a watered-down religious exemption? They won't vote for it now with a full religious exemption now, when they have control.
Republican backers of ENDA are digging in and seeking more sponsors for the bad bill, this Unity Fund that is funded by Paul Singer, the vulture capitalist.
The log cabin Republicans are continuing to support it too, saying, I don't know why you would walk away from this when we're on the verge of passing.
And they're the ones who are saying your opposition could help pass this bill since it's going to pass sooner or later. Tammy Baldwin, out lesbian senator from Wisconsin, said no bill is perfect, and she still backs the bill that she voted for in the Senate. Because remember, folks, this passed the Senate last year, and it's still alive.
Well, this is a holding action because we've caught these people at a hypocritical moment. They are all on board for ENDA. It has this broad religious exemption, and then they turn to the White House and they say, oh, but don't put that religious exemption on the executive order. So Queer Nation put out a press release this week saying, you're all hypocrites. You can't have it both ways.
If only they had watched Gay USA, because we have been talking about this for years.
But more and more we see people getting on board with this. And even, one group that was upset was the official transgender groups who were headed for Washington for their annual lobby day, which was going to prioritize ENDA.
Yep.
Even though, as they have now said, they don't need it because the court decisions and EEOC decisions say that they have a right to non-discrimination under a sex discrimination argument. So they're now saying, well, we were just doing it for you. But they have put out a flyer to hand to their Congress people as they go into lobby about all the reasons for employment non-discrimination or gender identity protections or whatever. And they've put a new little box at the bottom of it that says,
yes,
wait, I've got it here. The religious exemption in the Employment Non-Discrimination Act is unacceptable.
Oh, that's what we're saying.
This is a new position.
All right, we're going to move on to what some of these religious institutions are doing.
Yes.
Well, we start with, I guess, with George Fox University. Now, this is a Christian school, but it's a Quaker school, and the Quakers are normally very pro-gay.
In Newburgh, Oregon.
They granted, the Department of Education granted them a religious exemption, and they're using it to discriminate against a transgender student, not let Jace live in campus housing. The student had filed a complaint and was denied. He says, I deserve to be treated like the other men on campus.
Well, it turns out that Title IX has a religious exemption in it that says you are allowed to discriminate on the basis of your religious feelings. So Jace, who we may have a picture of or may not,
at George Fox University,
is out of luck at George Fox University.
These are Quakers. That can't stand. That's got to be turned around.
It seems highly unlikely. But then there's the story from Bethany, Oklahoma, and Southwestern Christian University, which expelled. There's Jace at George Fox University, who is out of luck with housing and cannot live with his friends on campus. And at Southwestern Christian U in Bethany, Oklahoma, there is a lesbian couple who got married. But Southwestern Christian U is a Pentecostal school and says they signed a lifestyle covenant when they came to this school that declared they would not engage in homosexual behavior.
And that's Christian Menard and Caden Parks. And Christian says that the covenant is selectively enforced. But they got hitched back in March in New Mexico.
Just before graduating as seniors, so they're out of luck.
And then Hobby Lobby, a trans employee, Megan Somerville, is suing because the company won't let her use the women's restroom as an employee or as a customer. So she filed with the Illinois Department of Human Rights in Aurora, Illinois, and I assume Hobby Lobby will be looking for some sort of religious exemption to torture Megan.
Their employee, who they pay very well. And in Macon, Georgia, the gay man Flint Dollar, was there ever a better name?
Yes, Zephyr Teachout, who's running against Andy Cuomo.
I think Flint Dollar for a gay man is a better name. Anyway, he is suing the Catholic school that fired him as a music teacher.
Mount DeSales Academy.
Because
Catholic
he
school.
Married his partner.
He cites
his male partner.
He cites sex discrimination in the case because this is Georgia, and they don't have a statewide LGBT rights law.
In Salem, Mass, a kind of good story, I guess. There's a Christian college there, Gordon College, that signed on to one of the letters from right-wing religious institutions to the president asking him to include a religious exemption in the executive order to federal contractors. So Salem, Mass's political leaders got wind of this and said, wait a minute, we have a non-discrimination law in this state, and this college is not living up to that, and we had a contract with them to operate Old Town Hall.
Yeah. Imagine if Mayor de Blasio stood up to some of the religious contractors in this town of New York.
Don't hold your breath.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Salem.
Yeah, so thank you, Salem, Mass. They canceled their contract with Gordon College, citing the non-discrimination law in Massachusetts. And so Salem, Mass is living out the law.
Oh, and Gordon is in danger, is being reviewed by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges for its accreditation.
Right, because they have non-discrimination standards too.
So the president of the school said he wants the legal right to discriminate, but he hasn't done it and has no intention of doing it. What the fuck? Then just stop.
Okay. Meanwhile, we have a sort of nice late-in-life story from Tacoma, Washington. Teacher Jim Gaylord taught at a public school there, but was fired 42 years ago because he was gay.
76 years old now.
And the school district president has taken note of this and decided it's time to make it up to Jim Gaylord.
Jim Gaylord didn't think he would ever get a reception like this inside a Tacoma school, not after being fired from the school district in 1972 and losing a lawsuit to get his job back a few years later.
It's a kind of closure. Over the years, I've been able to finally start looking back at it, the situation, without feeling too bad. And I think this completes the process.
Gaylord taught at Wilson High School for more than a decade. By all accounts, he was liked by his students and had positive evaluations. But when he admitted that he was gay, he was fired on the grounds that he was immoral.
1972 decision to terminate Mr. James Gaylord was written within the bounds of the law as they existed at the time. It does not reflect the values and morals of the district now.
Tonight, Kurt Miller with the Tacoma School Board formally apologized to Gaylord.
I offer a sincere apology to Mr. Jim Gaylord. Jim, thank you for continuing to teach us.
Well, 42 years later, never too late, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Now, how long will it take the Inn at the Abingtons in Scranton, Pennsylvania to apologize? They rejected a proposed lesbian wedding there. Here is the dilemma that exists, and we've been told to expect this, and here it is playing out. Pennsylvania has now legalized same-sex marriage. But Pennsylvania does not have a non-discrimination law that protects people on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity.
Well, then I suggest the couple sue on the basis of sex discrimination.
Let's hope Pennsylvania has at least that
But
law.
wait a minute, this story does have a little subtlety to it, because the person who wrote to them and refused them said, I truly do hope you find somewhere that will fulfill all your wedding dreams, because that person who wrote that that's a staffer who doesn't oppose this, but says that's not her stance, but that of the owner.
Right.
Which is a problem.
So on to wedding news. The most turmoil is in Colorado at the moment, where, as you may remember, the state attorney general decided he would go to court to ask that the ban on same-sex marriage be overturned, in hopes that that would encourage the courts to have that decision and then stay it, and so he could stop the rogue marriages being allowed in Boulder, as the county clerk there was handing out marriage licenses. Well, in fact, he did go to court. The court did say that they were overturning the law and did stay the decision pending appeal. But the clerks are just going ahead and handing out licenses anyway.
More than 140 in Boulder as of last week. This is under the clerk's interpretation of the 10th Circuit decision.
Well, there's another decision from another state judge who said that the Boulder clerk could still issue licenses because there is no irreparable harm, but must inform the couples that the validity of their marriages and licenses may be questioned.
Well, but isn't that the judge also who wouldn't stop Denver from doing it?
Yes, and Denver is doing it too, and most moving of all is Pueblo, Colorado, in the southern part of the state, a not very affluent town. It makes Colorado Springs look like San Francisco. Pueblo is a poor area. The population is 44% Latino. It is a traditionally conservative area, and here is what's going on in Pueblo, which my father used to call Pueblo, Colorado.
Pueblo County became the third county in the state of Colorado to offer same-sex marriage licenses, as the Pueblo County Clerk and Recorder's Office began offering licenses at 8 a.m. on the morning of July 11th. The day has been marked as momentous for the local LGBT community, and clerk and recorder Gilbert Bo Ortiz said he believes the decision puts Pueblo on the right side of history.
Well, after the Utah case, I read the ruling, and then I read the ruling in the Adams County case, and then finally the Boulder County case. And there was some words in the Boulder County case about individual rights outweighing the law, and at that point I realized that the level had shifted, and I was in favor of the individual's rights, and I knew at that point that I was ready to take the step toward marriage equality.
It's emotional. I think I've been crying off and on since last night. And this morning I woke up and said it's a beautiful day for a marriage. It's something that I think folks in the LGBT community have always dreamed of and never really thought about it being a reality that we can someday actually marry our partners. And the fact that it's happening here in Pueblo, the first county in southern Colorado to do it, is amazing.
Believing what I believe, both constitutionally and my own personal beliefs, so I have a sense of relief right now. I feel like I made the right decision, and I'm very happy for the couples that are celebrating their love today.
So Governor Hickenlooper there in Colorado is urging the Attorney General to back down from all this.
Well, he's a Democrat and the Attorney General's a Republican, so that has something to do with it. I can't tell you, as a former resident of Colorado, especially, I'm so moved by that happening there. It's
well,
really
we've even got it in New York now.
Marriage.
Hey,
well,
it wasn't easy.
And it's still not easy, as demonstrated by what's happening in Seacliff, New York, in Long Island.
Well, we have a film report about this. Bruce Kennedy, who's a candidate for assembly out there. Well, won't we run?
He's the mayor of Seacliff.
Yes.
He's in trouble.
Well, we don't have it.
Well,
we'll tell the story. It's a nice story. He's the mayor of Seacliff, and he's a candidate for the assembly out there. He's a Republican. The Republican Party is denying him their endorsement because he presided over same-sex marriages. Now, he says that's the law of New York, and he swore to uphold the Constitution.
Right.
But the Nassau County Conservative Party chair, Daniel Donovan, said, we had it on tape, the law doesn't mean anything to the Conservative Party. That's a hell of a nice statement. We believe in the law of God. Kennedy is in the Republican primary, but without the party backing.
For those of you who think that New York is a liberal place, this is Exhibit A. But here's what you have to understand. There are multiple parties in New York, and on the right-wing side you have the Republicans, but you also have the Conservatives. The Conservatives are a tiny party, but it is their votes that give Republicans in New York State any chance of winning in any election. So they hold hostage all Republican candidates around the state. And if the Republicans do not do the bidding of the Conservative Party, the Conservatives say, fine, we'll run our own candidate. We don't care if we lose. We don't care if you lose. You're going to go with us, or you're going to lose.
They made a lot of compromises. They backed that Pataki as governor for a long time, even though he was for abortion.
Yeah, and did he do anything for us?
Well, we passed the gay rights bill under him.
But
he opposed us all the way along, but he eventually came around.
But
I'm not praising him.
You would agree with my general theme here. So that's the Conservative Party, as quoted by Andy, that is going after this mayor.
How about that, Chris Christie? He says that marriage is settled in New Jersey, but the Republican Party should not give up on fighting it because he wants to be president. No, that's not what he said. He said,
talk about trying to have it both ways.
He said, certainly, I'm not going to give up because these are opinions that I feel strongly about.
Watch out in Iowa and New Hampshire where he's headed. He's not a good guy.
Okay.
The 10th Circuit Court has ordered Utah to recognize the 1,000-plus marriages performed there during the days when same-sex marriage was first legalized before a court stayed it while it goes through an appeals process. The state had wanted to not recognize those marriages, even though they acknowledged that they were legal at the time. They said, well, the marriages are legal, but if the change in the law is stayed, then so are these marriages. But the 10th Circuit has said, no, you have to recognize them. And then in Indiana, the governor, Mike Pence, has said that state agencies will not recognize the hundreds of same-sex marriages legally performed there while they're appealing the court order that struck down the ban there. And the Attorney General in Indiana has asked the 7th Circuit for a full en banc hearing of the appeal, skipping the sort of 3-judge panel. The 7th Circuit has announced that it is combining the Indiana case with a Wisconsin case, and they'll have oral arguments next month on that.
Also in the Utah case, the Attorney General there appealed the 10th Circuit ruling directly to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
And if the court is not ready for review, which they may not be, then the 10th Circuit thing stands, and a lot of experts think that the Supreme Court will not take the state's appeal.
Well, first of all, the Supreme Court is supposed to take cases that are in dispute between states.
That's the usual. Then they almost have to.
Yeah.
If there are conflicting appellate rulings.
If 2 circuits came up with different rulings.
But that hasn't happened yet.
No, it hasn't. And so they may be waiting for that, or they may, as some have suggested, let every circuit rule in our favor and then decide they don't
have to do
need
anything.
Exactly.
The 7th Circuit in Chicago, they're expediting appeals in marriage suits in Wisconsin and Indiana. Arguments are August 13th. The ACLU is asking Attorney General Holder to recognize the Indiana marriages. And that's also big. That's kind of big news this week. It really is a shift in the administration's position, because Eric Holder now says that state bans on same-sex marriage are unconstitutional. It is a new step for the Obama administration, because they opposed the bans, but they hadn't argued against them in court.
I think what he's saying is that they will argue against them when it does get to the Supreme Court. I don't know that they're going to go into the circuit court appeals cases, but maybe they will.
The Nevada case has a court date on September 8th, if you're wondering.
And Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito, who is certainly not our friend, rejected the appeal by a Pennsylvania clerk for a stay on the continuing performance of same-sex marriages.
And the Attorney General in Wisconsin appealed the ruling striking down the state ban.
Mayor David Garcia of Waveland, Mississippi, becomes the first mayor in Mississippi to sign on to Freedom to Marry's list of mayors in support of same-sex marriage around the country.
Any more legal cases around marriage? I have some other stuff.
No.
Well, then there's what's happening in the United Methodist Church. We thought that they were sort of pulling back on all this in terms of going after pastors who do same-sex weddings, but not in Philadelphia. A complaint was filed against 36 ministers who assisted Reverend Frank Schaefer in a marriage ceremony in November at the Arch Street United Methodist Church. Schaefer was reinstated after being defrocked. Bishop Peggy Jordan there says she's following disciplinary procedure and hopes that a just resolution can be achieved. The conservatives say, you're stonewalling. Do God's will.
Sean Patrick Maloney, representative from New York.
First out gay congressman from New York.
Is in trouble because he hired a company to use a drone to photograph his wedding from on high. It's kind of a generic wedding video. You can see it online.
Anybody could be getting married.
Yeah, it's not like traditional wedding pictures that have actual close-ups of the people getting married and the wedding guests. But he's in trouble because it turns out the Federal Aviation Administration has rules against the commercial use of drones, and Sean Patrick Maloney sits on the committee that oversees the FAA.
He's in a tight race up there for re-election.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Other gay news. Where are we? Well, okay. Tell us
President Obama. You may have seen a lot of news about President Obama visiting Texas and getting into fights with Governor Rick Perry about people coming across the border. All of that, more about that in a second. But first of all, what you probably didn't see was the president's visit to the Franklin Barbecue in Austin, Texas, where the guy at the register happened to be a gay guy named Daniel Rugg Webb, who does drag shows and is a performer. And
we are everywhere.
And when the president walked up to the counter to pay for his barbecue or
there
whatever,
it is. There's the picture.
Daniel slapped the counter and said, "Equal rights for gay people." And Obama said, "Are you gay?" And Webb says, "Only when I have sex." Well, first of all, I would argue with that, Daniel.
Sure.
I bet you're gay 24 hours a day in everything you do.
I think he was just being having a little witty repartee.
Well, and the president rewarded him with a fist bump for that joke.
There you go.
Yeah. But things are more serious at the border, of course, and one of the big stories this week did involve someone gay, Jose Antonio Vargas,
Yes.
who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, undocumented, brought here from the Philippines when he was a child, and has written extensively about this, came out as undocumented.
Yep.
In a cover story in the New York Times Magazine and all over the place. So he went
testified at Congress.
Yes.
They didn't arrest him.
No, but he went down to Texas to investigate this story of these kids coming across the border and stumbled unknowingly into the sort of exclusion zone where your papers get checked everywhere you go. So he's in McAlpin, Texas. He suddenly...
And they profiled him.
Well, he appeared at the airport to leave, and all he has is a Philippine passport. And they questioned him about this and ended up leading him off in handcuffs, arresting him. They finally processed him and let him go on his own recognizance, but he has to go back to court there, and he is in trouble as an undocumented resident of the country.
Right. Okay.
But I was heartened by the story of the Eichner Foundation out of Iowa, which is funded by two gay men who have announced that they are funding relocation of 1,000 of the kids crossing the border in Iowa. They will support kids being taken in by Iowa families, or they will provide financial support for what they need. That is a nice story.
Okay. Speaking of President Obama, a big letter was sent to him protesting the surveillance of American Muslim community leaders, signed on to by the ACLU, Lambda, GLAD, that's GLAD, Advocates and Defenders, HRC, NGLTF, NCLR, NCTE, and others. They want the guidance on surveillance to ban profiling, not just based on race, but religion, sexual orientation, and national origin, among other things.
In New York City, the city is issuing a new city ID card that is supposed to help undocumented people have some ID so they can get access to some city services. It's also expected to help those who are transgender but have not met the city requirement of, for instance, having surgery to get a new birth certificate. This will be an ID card in which they can self-identify in the gender in which they live their life.
And I'm not remembering, there was the Civil Liberties Union made some objections, though, to the way this was being laid out.
It's a very, people have ambivalence about a city ID card.
But Mayor de Blasio, who is headed for Italy, does not have any ambivalence about the Pope.
Vacation.
Oh, he's going for a vacation, but he's also asked Cardinal Dolan to ask Pope Francis to visit New York. I mean, like, take it easy. This guy is an anti-gay leader. I know.
They all do this. Every mayor, they all.
Oh, so?
Yeah.
If everybody said jump off a bridge? All right.
I get it.
All right. In Mercer County, Ohio, this is a terrible story, and we have a picture of the sheriff, Jeff Gray. I want you to take a look at his face. He said that the police are stepping up patrols in public parks and using plainclothes cops, and if they find anyone having any fun, sex, they will be arrested. Their mugshots will be released to the media, and he refers to this as deviant behavior. Now, look, you know, anybody who has sex in a public place should be discreet and all that kind of stuff. Shouldn't scare the horses, bother anybody. But to put people's mugshots and give them to the paper before anything has been proven, you know, it could be just walking through the park and you get swept up in a thing, is an invitation to terrible abuse, and it's horrible. They don't do it to everybody who gets arrested for everything, so why do this?
And mostly it's about cops soliciting sexual behavior, and then they blame people.
Right.
A couple of sports stories. At the Major League Baseball All-Star Game this week, they honored Glenn Burke, the late mourned gay baseball player, one of the first to be semi-out.
Inventor of the high five. He invented that gesture.
And was really horribly treated in baseball by the Dodgers manager Tommy Lasorda,
who had a gay son who died of AIDS, who he denied
over and over, and eventual Oakland manager Billy Martin, who called him gay slurs in the locker room in front of all his teammates. The teammates loved him. The teammates on the Dodgers were heartbroken when Tommy Lasorda got rid of him. And he ended up impoverished, addicted, and with AIDS. And his sister sort of rescued him off the streets and took him in Oakland and took care of him in his last years. But, you know, there was a great movie made about him, a documentary. And Major League Baseball is finally acknowledging his existence and acknowledging him as a gay man.
Yes, and as a pioneer.
Yeah.
And they've also hired Billy Beane, the former player who's out gay now, because we've never had an out gay active player, but they've hired Billy to work on gay inclusion. I mean, they're falling behind the NFL and some of the other sports.
And the NBA and Major League Soccer and everybody else.
And then Chris Cluey says that the Vikings, this is the guy who's one of our big advocates, he's not gay himself, won't release its investigation into his firing. He says that the special teams coach there, Mike Prefer, began using anti-gay slurs toward him after he came out for same-sex marriage, and now they won't release the results of this investigation.
I think this may force it. They say they just aren't ready to release it yet. They're still reviewing it. They're, you know, parsing it, whatever. So we'll see whether this comes out.
Sounds like lawyers are involved.
Yeah. You might want to take a look at the new report from the Equality Federation, which is the coalition of statewide groups across the country. They've published a report called What's Next, meaning after the marriage fight. And they sort of go state by state on what to expect. So if you go to equalityfederation.org, you can take a look for their report, What's Next, and get some ideas for yourself.
Let's talk about this. You want to talk about the CDC survey?
Yes.
This is from the National Health Interview Survey. It found that 1.6% of adults identify to them as gay or lesbian, and 0.7% is bisexual. That means that, according to this survey, there's just like 2.3% of us in the country, so what's everybody so upset about? They don't survey about transgender. 96.6% labeled themselves as straight. 1.1% declined to answer, said they didn't know, or checked something else.
This is the first time this survey has asked any LGB questions. They're still not asking T, but here's the deal. They come to your house, they sit you down for an hour and ask you questions. First of all, who's going to agree to do that survey? Not me anymore. I'm too old for that stuff. And then you have this government representative in your house, in your face, asking you these questions. So people who are out and secure are going to answer honestly, but the vast majority are not.
Well, I mean, I thought we'd be getting beyond that a lot.
You are the Pollyanna of the movement this week.
In many places, but anyway.
No.
But they also found that we smoke more, drink more, test for HIV. We test for HIV more. We take the test more, and we're more likely to meet federal guidelines for aerobic physical activity. So the survey did not ask about gender identity, as I said. By the way, in Canada, where they interviewed young people, 10% of 18 to 34-year-olds say that they're LGBT. So, and our friend Rex says, well, this is a country which has full civil rights for LGBT people.
When you come across numbers like this, all they're showing you is what people are willing to say. They are not an accurate representation of how many people have feelings of same-sex attraction, which I would suggest is more like 90%.
Yeah.
Even the women on the talk about that.
Yeah.
So take all this with a grain of salt and move on to international news.
Where 10 U.S. senators are urging President Obama to review whether anti-gay laws in sub-Saharan Africa should affect those countries' eligibility for duty-free imports under the African Growth and Opportunity Act. Now,
meanwhile, there's
I mean, we could be doing this to a lot of countries.
Yeah, they name Uganda and Nigeria specifically, but a lot of African leaders are headed to Washington, D.C. in August for a U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, including Uganda President Museveni. It seems to me we might want to be on hand to greet Uganda President Museveni in Washington in August.
Well, you know, American Quakers for Uganda have set up a Friends Underground Railroad in Olympia to help Ugandans fleeing the country under the anti-gay laws, and they've got 107 people, small grants through local people there, because this is a very dicey kind of a thing.
Well, it's controversial because there are some people who have fled the country of Uganda and ended up in refugee camps in Kenya where they are more abused than they were in Uganda. So people are saying to the Quakers, wait a minute, what are you doing here? And the Quakers are saying, look, we can't give you the details because that would reveal too much, but we are getting people out and not into those refugee camps.
Right.
Who knows?
They're trying.
Yeah. In Dominica, in the Caribbean, the prime minister there says there will
Roosevelt Skerritt.
There will be no same-sex marriage.
We will never accept it.
Meanwhile, though, there are local gay activists who are trying to get their anti-sodomy law repealed. Anti-buggery
law.
Yeah.
The prime minister says he'll meet with them, but I don't think one group should impose any views on any other group. Oh, come on. What the hell?
In Kiev, in the Ukraine, there's a little video online of 20 neo-Nazis assaulting a gay club.
Throwing smoke bombs in.
Yeah,
awful.
Firecrackers.
In Argentina, the LGBT group there staged a kiss-in for the visit of Russia's Putin.
Yeah, they went to the Russian embassy to do that. The British Dance Council wants to ban same-sex couples from dance competitions because they're winning too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Particularly.
But they want to give us our own category.
Yes. Segregation reappears.
But the big category is what's called mixed. So it's really not right, and we're trying to do something about that.
Yes. 119 United States representatives have asked President Obama to tell Brunei to respect human rights of gay people, women, etc., before going ahead with the trade pact.
Going back to England again, the Church of England voted to let women be bishops. Opponents, the conservatives there, said that will lead to same-sex marriage. That's what they said. And we can only hope.
In Singapore, which you may remember many years ago was caning people for misdeeds, they will destroy every copy of And Tango Makes Three, the children's book about the gay penguins.
And two other LGBT youth titles. Gay sex is illegal there, but it's also the home of the Pink Dot rallies.
Yeah.
And they also banned The Kids Are All Right, the movie, from being seen by under 21s. Well, that wasn't such a bad decision, probably. No, we didn't like that movie very much.
No. In Uganda, they have arrested 5 more gay people, a teenager, some older men. It's for people who say they're not putting that law, the anti-gay law, into effect, yes, they are.
In Poland, the Lambda Association there, an LGBT group, is seeking funding for a 250-person shelter in Warsaw for homeless LGBT people, and they're looking for grants from Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein to do it.
In Croatia, the parliament there has passed a law that allows for same-sex life partnerships, which they say are the equivalent of marriage, except with no adoption rights. Baby steps forward.
But Macedonia is trying to ban same-sex marriage in its constitution, tends to do that.
In
Australia,
yes,
72% now say they want marriage equality. 77% want a conscience vote in the parliament. It's got a ruling coalition led by the Conservatives over there, who are called the Liberal Party, by the way.
It's basically a situation of more and more pressure being put on the ruling party. I'm not sure whether that will lead to, well, I think it will eventually, but I don't know. know if they're going to respond to the immediate pressure. Meanwhile, what may also have an effect is that the hero of Australia, Olympic swimmer Ian Thorpe,
yes.
Has come out after many years of denying he was gay.
Didn't we know this already?
Well, it was so known that in his autobiography 2 years ago he denied it.
I know. He said, I'm not. He said, all my sexual experiences have been with women.
Now he says he was confused.
Well, he was very depressed.
Yes.
And he, you know, but this will help, we assure you.
Yes. And in northern Italy, there's a right-wing nutcase mayor who has put a picture of Putin on the wall of his office, who he considers his hero, and he wants to ban any displays of affection between same-sex couples in public.
A $680 fine.
Oh!
Does that no same-sex kissing? Does that include Jesus and Judas? He said it's a question of respect, and I am convinced it is morally harmful to. He looks a lot like Rick Perry, don't you think?
Not really, but I like that we're putting up the mug shots of these people.
Yeah, I think they should be shamed. All right, AIDS news.
AIDS news.
Well, the CDC is warned of this. Is well, I'll start. Well.
In a British report,
yes.
They are continuing to put together information that poppers are occasionally making people lose their vision, specifically a 30-year-old man in this case. They think the formulation has changed over the years, and they can be dangerous. And it may be irreversible in some cases.
I certainly can't say I never did, but I avoided it. Pretty much. But people used to really be into it.
But the real headline is from Mississippi, where the infant who we thought had shed the virus somehow been cleared of HIV because she was treated at birth with a triple combination of drugs rather than just one that they usually use.
It was big headline news.
Oh,
when it happened in March.
The cure, the cure. But guess what? She has turned up with the virus rebounding.
But the Berlin patient is hanging in there.
Well, he had a transplant, a bone marrow transplant that gave him specific immunity kinds of genes that from people who have a factor that makes them unable to acquire HIV. So, but that's such an elaborate and life-threatening process that it's not practical.
So we've got to stick with the prevention methods that we know. And the New York City Department of Health has a new poster, if we can get it up there, for advocating for PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis. It says, share the night, not HIV. It says PrEP is preventive medication that can help you stay negative, even if he might be positive. And it also promotes condoms as added protection.
And protection from sexually transmitted diseases other than
because a lot
HIV.
of people don't know about this stuff. In the United Kingdom, they did a survey, and a third of teens, 12 to 17, think they can't get HIV from unprotected sex. And asked if they've ever spoken about HIV, 42% said that they have not. That means we've got to renew our education efforts.
Or start them in the first place. The World Health Organization has announced that all men having sex with men should consider pre-exposure prophylaxis. Infection rates among men having sex with men are exploding around the world, and therefore they are saying you should consider taking the pill that can prevent you becoming infected.
And the guidelines also urge countries to end political and social barriers to HIV services and treatment, especially anti-gay laws. And by the way, on PrEP, my old friend Howard Grossman, who's my age, 60, he's an HIV doctor and activist. He has come out about taking PrEP. He wrote a great article about this online. He's tired of being scared about being infected. And then there was a huge piece in New York Magazine, you can Google all these things, by Tim Murphy about the whole thing about PrEP and men who are taking it, men who are not.
Cover story.
Yeah,
very
big story.
Huge, getting a lot of talk. You mentioned criminalization. The Department of Justice has put out a best practices guide to reform HIV-specific criminal laws to align with scientifically supported factors. I think this is quite stunning that the Justice Department is saying to states, you know, it's really not appropriate to criminalize people with HIV who have sex. You have to look at what's really going on. Do they have an undetectable viral load? Are they using protection? What's the real story here? Was there transmission? Before you start throwing everyone in jail for 40 years. And that's terrific that they're doing that.
The CDC is warning of the synergistic bad effects of HIV and smoking. 42% of people who are HIV positive smoke versus 20% for the general population. HIV positive smokers are more likely to develop HIV-related diseases than those with HIV who do not smoke.
Well, here's another warning. Propecia, since men's biggest concern is actually hair loss.
I lost quite a lot this week. Thank you, Vinny.
It saves the hair. Me too. Thank you, Vinny. It saves the hair, but it destroys sex drive, reduces penis and testicle size.
Got that?
So
what's a
what do
man
you care
to do?
about more? Hair or sex drive and penis and testicle size? Take your pick.
Right.
And it can be irreversible.
All right, if you're going to talk about men, I'm going to talk about women and AIDS.
Okay.
University of California, San Francisco study looked at a group intervention by something called the Medea Project, something called expressive therapy, that talking about it, telling their stories, and performing their stories to each other helped their health status, improve their social support, their efficacy, their safety, the quality of their relationships. The point of the study is medication alone is totally insufficient. 90% are on the drugs, but they're dying from suicide, addiction, and violence. Glenn Burke. The project focuses on storytelling, as I said.
There was a great protest around the country last week, the National Gay Blood Drive. People are really sick of the fact that any gay men who've had sex in the last 150 years.
Since 1977, that's what it says on the form. Have you had sex with a man, if you're a man, since 1977?
So in 60
I
cities,
hope so.
In 60 cities, there was a protest where they set up blood drive operations, and gay men brought friends who are eligible to give and had them give blood, and went through this whole announcement to the federal government about this is what you're missing out on, and we protest this.
Okay.
All right, on to entertainment news.
All right. Well, the Emmy nominations are out, and for the first time, an out transgender person was nominated for an award. Laverne Cox, we have a picture of Laverne there, who nominated as
Outstanding guest actress in a comedy series for Orange is the New Black.
Yes, and there's Laverne on the cover of The Advocate. She is also, we have another picture, she's also going to guest on Bravo's Girlfriends next season as war journalist and LGBT activist. Are you waiting for it? Adele Northrup.
See the resemblance?
She's going to be presenting an award at a marriage equality gala. It's based on Vicky Iovini's Girlfriend's Guide book series.
Yeah, Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce. This is just a one-shot guest shot by Laverne, but maybe the character will be expanded to many episodes.
And, you know, if she decides to move on and do other things, you can pick up the role.
Yeah, exactly. No one would know the difference.
Now, on the Emmy nominations, lots for Modern Family again, including Jesse Tyler Ferguson.
Normal Heart, Project Runway, Glee. The Emmys are going to be the new Tonys in terms of gay content.
Nathan Lane got one for Best Actor in a Guest Actor in a Comedy Series. Normal Heart, which is tipped to win for Best Movie.
Yeah.
All right. The Archie comic book series. They've got something called Life with Archie, which is their adult series. Been going on for about 4 or 5 years now. Well, we got a picture of the cover of the last issue of this. They're ending the series. Archie is set to be shot and killed, saving his gay friend Kevin Keller, who is a politician, an out gay politician, dying, as they say, heroically and selflessly, calling it a natural conclusion to the series. But the other incarnations, for those of you who love Archie as a teenager, will continue.
Yeah.
Nathan Lane is in the Nance is going to be still on screens in movie theaters, and I got a couple of play reviews. Do we have any time?
A little bit.
Well, James Franco has made his directorial debut in the theater with a mess called The Long Shrift. We got a picture there of a woman who recants a rape accusation, trying then to talk to the man she put in prison for 5 years. The setup has possibilities, but the execution extinguishes them. I can recommend a new play called Cover by Bill McMahon at the Stressland Theater about suburban men having an affair behind the backs of their wives. I thought this was like old stuff, but it actually is done very nicely and freshly.
Like Vicious?
Well, yeah, or like Far From Heaven. Max Reiser and Tony Travestino handle their parts very sensitively, but this woman named Karen de la Penha, as the older man's wife, really enlivens the show. I mean, I was laughing a lot. I don't laugh very much in the theater. She was terrific, very biting wit. It's part of the Midtown Festival. It could be tightened up just a little bit, but it's very worthwhile.
And you can be on the lookout for an opera coming to Brooklyn in September, produced by the American Opera Project, called As One. It is a transgender story. It's a one-act chamber opera, and it was commissioned by American Opera Project. And it's also going to be produced at Utah State University in April of 2015.
Okay. You want me to go back to a story I didn't cover since we've got a little time?
Right ahead.
Well, this was an international news. In Britain, a guy named Randall Cole of California, who became a British citizen in May because he married his British husband a while ago. He went to the passport office ostensibly to be questioned about someone who was using his identification. But when he got in there and he referred to his husband, he just talked about his husband, the agent tightened up. And this isn't, he's got his young son with him in this interview. She asked all these inappropriate questions about his family and his sex life. And the agent, when he started to say, "What are you doing to me?" the agent said, "We can ask anything we like." Now, she's being recorded by the service because that's what they do. And she's been suspended and under investigation. But, you know, they think they're entitled to do this kind of stuff.
Oh, they do. They're in charge. They can do anything they want.
Who's the man? Who's the woman? This is the kind of stuff she was asking. You think that's okay for the kid?
Yeah.
In front of the kid?
Yeah. I want to know. Oh, here they come. All right. Well, it looks like we are running out of time this week. We urge you to get out and get active against any religious exemptions in your neighborhood.
We urge you to get out and register to vote if you're not registered to vote, because there's some very important elections coming up this year, this fall, to hold on to the Senate of the United States for the Democrats.
But we'll continue to talk about this next week and beyond. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
All right.